23. Thamud, another group of disbelievers, rejected the warnings. They said, shall we follow a man like us? We will then be wrong and stupid. 25. Was he chosen out of all of us to receive the message? He is a flagrant liar. 26. They will find out tomorrow who the flagrant liar is. 27. We sent the camel as a test for them. Just watch them and be patient. 28. Tell them, this was directed to their messenger Salih. 28. Tell them that the water shall be shared between them at specific times. 29. They consulted their leader, and after receiving the message, he slaughtered the camel. How terrible was my retribution and warnings. 31. We sent upon them one strike, whereupon they became like harvested hay. We have made the Quran easy to remember. Is there anyone who wishes to learn? As you know, God's science suited every age. In that age, a camel that knew when to eat and when to drink and what day was a miracle for those people. They were dealing with camels a lot. At the time of Moses, magic was a big deal. At the time of Jesus, healing the sick was a big deal. At the time of Muhammad, the literary excellence was a big deal. They had the literary competitions. Now the computer is a big deal. And now we have a computer miracle. A miracle that is suitable for the computer age. How can you divide the number that Abdullah did when you take the number of verses and put the number of each verse in every surah in the Quran? You end up with a half-mile long number. 12,692 digits. This number of digits is a multiple of the common denominator of the Quran, the number 19. And also that number is a multiple of 19. When the Quran was revealed, the biggest number they heard of was 1,000. That was the biggest number. Well, 50,000. But then multiples of 1,000 anyway. So how can you read this number? 12,692 digits. If you go to the mathematics department at the university, tell them, read this number, you get out of here. But it's true. The number is here, conforms to the code. So this is the computer age. You have to have a computer to know what this number. I can bring you the computer printout that Abdullah wrote in. This thick papers. just solving this one problem about this one number. Dividing it into 19. And it is divisible. So during the time of Thamud, the camel was the sign. During the time of Moses, he threw down the staff and became a serpent, and swallowed the serpent, the other snakes of the magicians. This is what they believed, because they realized this is no magician. They are the experts. Before we go to the people of Lot, are there any questions? Number 33. The people of Lot rejected the warnings. We showered them with rocks, except Lot's family. We saved them at dawn. That was a blessing from us. We thus reward the appreciative. We had warned them of our strike, but they doubted the warnings. They negotiated with him about his guests. We had blinded their eyes. They have deserved my retribution and warnings. On the following morning, they were hit by devastating retribution. They have incurred my retribution and warnings. We have made the Quran easy to remember. Is there anyone who wishes to learn? So as you see consistently, the warnings, enough warnings followed by the retribution. So in other words, God is telling the people, you're neglecting your souls, you're neglecting yourselves, you're going to incur retribution. The people of Lot were wicked homosexuals. You're not doing the homosexuals any favor by giving them their quote-unquote rights. You have to talk them out of it somehow. The last 10 years they have been demanding their rights until they got AIDS. Because now you can't just take San Francisco and turn it upside down like Sodom and Gomorrah. There are many good people in San Francisco. But this AIDS hits selectively the homosexuals. Well, if you're doing everything right, why should you be warned? Which verse is that? I like incurred better than deserved. Better enough. They have. I don't know. I have to look it up. They have deserved my retribution and warnings. Well, if you're doing everything right, you don't deserve a warning. As a matter of fact, wherever you're working, you get a warning only before you get disciplinary action. But if you're doing everything perfect, you don't get a warning, do you? Warning, you're doing everything perfect. The New Translation, I'm using the word incur in place of deserve, because we learn that people incur whatever happens to them. Remember the law in the Quran that nothing happens to you except as a consequence of your own actions. Nothing happens. Did you ever get a warning where you work that there's something going? That's right. It's okay. I don't care about linguistics as long as a warning is a negative thing. Yeah. Warning, you're going to be demoted next month. That's negative. You know, unless you straighten up, you're going to be demoted. That's a negative. Any other questions? This surah is short, but the surah is full of lessons. The Arabs have been warned. I can tell you right now, we're going to witness a terrible, terrible disaster coming up to the Arabs. Today in the mail, I just got a newspaper where they had the headlines telling them that they are not following the Quran. They received the warnings. This time they didn't put my negative, they put the real picture. They're calling me names and everything, but at least they didn't put the negative. So they received warnings. I don't know what will happen, but the Quranic teachings point at a terrible disaster happening to the Arab world. Of course, they have been incurring a lot of humiliation and problems in the last 40 years. But now the warnings have been really concentrated to them. They have been told that every single mosque does not uphold the commandments of the Quran, not a single one. So we'll see.
You're saying they have been told.
I just got a newspaper that is very popular there, and they're quite prominent display of the warnings. And it's not the first time either. Which newspaper? Warning that the Islam they're following has nothing to do with the Quran or the Prophet Muhammad. Yeah. Yeah. Liwa al-Islam is called. But it's been in almost every newspaper over there. Magazines, the most famous magazines. The average Egyptian heard about the miracle of the Quran, at least. Yeah. Yeah. You met the wrong people.
Well, I didn't meet many.
You know, it's been really intense. It's been intense. Publications and the warnings, and everybody heard about it. Almost. No, it's been in Akhir Sa'a. You know what Akhir Sa'a looks like? Rosal Yusuf. I have the copies here. Al-Ahram. Al-Ahram, every day in Ramadan they publish something for the last 3 years.
They don't get it. It's probably the same thing.
I wish it weren't just distortion. The more I find myself looking at questions in the text, the more I find it.
Well, everything you told us, everything you mentioned, Master.
I was just recently reading the letters to Paul and Revelation.
Yeah, but
the whole thing is faith in Jesus Christ, faith in Jesus Christ, salvation in Jesus Christ. And it's not, I always thought it was just, one or two really famous ones, like not just under the gospel of heaven and the Son, and God so loved the world and gave it to all his Son. Those are the ones that I thought were kind of biggies. But especially in the New Testament, it's a lot of it.
Well, the epistles are now they have a Jesus conference every year, and they announced that only the first 2 epistles are correct, the rest are junk. They said they have no confidence in them. But if you look at the Gospels, the majority is truth.
You get 99% of Christians would never hear that either.
Yeah.
Same as the Muslims. I mean, even if they
Exactly.
hear it, they won't hear it. And the Christians would not, if they heard somebody say that, they wouldn't hear it.
They will not recognize it. Yeah. But it's a newspaper every year, the Jesus conference every year. In fact, these most famous statements, they declared they were fake. Like the one you just mentioned, I'm the way, I'm the life and the way, and this and that. None goes to the Father except through me. That's a fake one. And this is coming out of the Christian scholars.
So in the gospel, the 4 gospels, the same majority of it?
99% is truth. For example, none of them says Jesus, Son of God, except John. And in John it is only 4 times. John is the most recent of the 4. But the other 3 don't say Jesus, Son of God.
And so there's the one, the letter to Paul,
those are epistles.
And those are the ones that are given by the...
They ruled that they are all fake except for the first 2 I forgot the names. If you read the book Jesus, the preacher wrote, it gives the report on all of these. Have you read that book? Well, we have an office copy. You can get there, put you in there, and lock you in, and have you read it if you want. Are there any questions on this? It doesn't have to be. Look at that. By the way, this surah, this is the only surah in the Quran. This is the piece of information on the time from the computer facts. This is the only surah in the Quran where the name of God is in every verse, at least once. This surah here, the only one in the whole Quran where every verse has the name, the word Allah in it, at least once. Some of the verses are horrible.
57 Allah.
Say it again.
57. God, 57 times. In this
Really? Oh, my goodness. Alright. Here's another piece of information. So these are the well, it's a blessing, yes. See what is happening when there's a messenger. God is sending information to the whole group through the messenger, and the messenger himself is benefiting from this information. So it will save us a lot of trouble if we obey. This includes the messenger and the people, because this information comes to everybody. I see this in my last trip to Canada, for example. I mentioned the issue of the age of 40, and I assumed that everybody accepted it, but they didn't, and I ended up wasting so much time on it. And it's a blessing if the people have the understanding of, well, for example, this verse. They'll be so comfortable if they have the conviction and understanding. They will not waste so much time arguing back and forth, you know. Why 40? How can a person who's 35 go to heaven if he didn't do this and that? But it's a piece of information that got sent to us, and they gave us the proofs and the evidence and a number from the Quran. So a person who's blessed, God says it's a blessing because it saves us a lot of time. It's finished, it's closed. When we say, God said, up to 40, everybody goes to heaven, and here's the number in the Quran, and here are the proofs, here are the signs, then we're convinced. So it's a blessing. So I appreciate the fact that this verse deals specifically with disobedience to the message. It's obedience in matters that have to do with God and information that's coming from God. It's not personal obedience. It's obedience to God, because the information is coming from God. And we have in history, the history tells us they were having a battle or something, and the Prophet Muhammad said that was camped here, and they went to him and they said, "Is this information from you or from God? If it's from God, we'll do that." He said, "No, it's from me." He said, "This is a stupid idea. Kids, that was not out of here." You know? So once he said it's from me, they were free to not to obey. So the obedience is really to God. This is actually written in history. That we're all dead if we obey you. And they did move on to some other place. We do have a part where we ask general questions, so it's not general questions. Yes?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes. Oh, my God. Yeah, listen to this, man. You're going to get a kick out of this. Yeah, thank you. You're writing, man. The word, they said that Salih, this came out of their group. And the old timers will remember this. They said, Salem, they said this is God's cabin, let it have its own drinks in some places. And then they slaughtered the camel. So the word, people underage excuse us, but they said that they had sex with the camel. Don't kill the camel. That's what came out.
You're right.
This is what they said. What do you get that? They said the word did not mean. They wanted a specific word that means slaughtering. And actually, the word is specific enough. It is not a common word. So this is one of the examples that conspiracy is from the devil. And they actually came back and they argued with me. Said, why you translated the slaughter of the camel? So we really are living the Quran. Conspiracy is from the devil. Obviously, the devil gave us that idea.
Also, the people were reading they were translating from the Quran in Arabic to English. They were not using this.
I think they used both. They used Arabic and English. So they had some other translations.
And they were using it all together.
Yes, they can actually even Dr. Kuhn had that idea. Martha, you know Arabic. The word is عقروه. And the word ذبحوه. It's not in the camel. So the word in the Quran, what they did with the camel was slaughtered. So they said عقروه, I mean having sex with the camel, not killing it. Pervert. Conspiracy from the devil. So this is what happens if we separate ourselves from the believers. The world forgets us. Okay, back to Robert.
Okay. Especially the part that God may make room for you. And I thought that was in terms of.
Actually, it's happened now. Literally, where's Errol? Did you find a place to sit down? Did you ask somebody to move? Did you have to ask somebody to move? No. Okay. But it's possible. He comes in and finds that there's nobody. There's no room. He asks somebody who can make room. Can take a different or like Robert says.
Also, think of it as be considerate.
Exactly.
Be kind to others.
Exactly. Be considerate of others. It's a general principle.
So,
And that is, if you're nice to the people, do unto others like
if you'd have done to you,
God
right.
will be kind to you, like He was kind to the others.
Okay.
If your own comes say, will you please say, no, don't I know. That's being inconsiderate, really.
Deed is what they did.
Yeah, they align themselves with the enemies of God.
Okay.
Actually, we have examples of these. For people who would, for example, align themselves. I'm talking about somebody who goes to the Islamic Center. Islamic Center, they flagrant idol worshippers, they devote their prayers to God alone. And you know that they anger God when they do this. They will not accept La ilaha illallah. You go there and tell them La ilaha illallah, they call you kafir. The Saudi Arabia in the paper, they're criticizing me for saying that the man should have this freedom of expression. And in that letter they say, we agree, we admire, or we applaud the Catholic Church for making a stand against the man rule. So this is the Islamic Center writing that. They're attacking me and applauding the Catholic Church. Okay. Now I say La ilaha illallah. The Catholic Church says, praise Mary, Mother of God. So it's not an issue of worshipping God, it's politics for something. Now how can they applaud the Catholic Church for anything? Because the Catholic Church itself practices the same thing that Khomeini practices. They don't like people to write about their shroud of Turin and all the nonsense that they have. And they have heavy censorship. They excommunicate people right and left because of their opinions. So they are This was better. Right. And the Catholic.
Which was exactly the same thing. It's nice when we right here, one right after the other, so you can just see how identical both groups are.
But you can see how will God look at people like this, applauding people who are saying, "Praise Mary, Mother of God." That's Christian. Mary, Mother of God. And condemning somebody who says La ilaha illallah, worship God alone. So anybody who aligns himself with those people, God will anger with them. This is verse 15. God will separate with them severe retribution, even indeed is what they do.
No, they're saying no. There are those who ally themselves with people who have angered God. Okay.
We seek refuge in God from Satan. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. Tonight we're starting at Surah 55, excuse me. And our teacher tonight will be Lori, right? But before we start, I want to make some corrections in my khutbah today. I make some boo-boos sometimes. Sometimes I say things that are not appear to be not very tactful. For example, we have here a great team of cake bringers or cake makers, and when I asked, and Rahima's turn, Lori's turn, I said the best. So they're all great makers of cakes, bringers of cakes, and this appears not to be tactful. But I have to explain to you that each believer is the best. So when I say the best, I'm referring to every single one of them, because we're all. I hope I don't make it worse. No, honest, because you people are so special that every one of you is the best. And when I say that, I just want to pay you the highest possible compliment without infringing on the others' properties, that they are the best, each one of them. Every single. Did I describe your cake as the best when you brought it in? Now, how do I get out of this one? Help! I think I get out by saying, okay, take it over, Lori.
It was really a test for me because I just wanted to know. And I never understood the jinns. It was just like, I read it and I knew that they existed, thank you. And I knew because it was in the Quran, I had to believe it, but I didn't know what they were, and nobody could explain it to me, and I got really wild explanations of what the jinns were. And it always troubled me, but I just forced myself to submit. And in the second chapter of the Quran, where it says that the believers are those who believe in the unseen, and this was part of the unseen. And I knew that inshallah with time that God would explain it to me. And one of the blessings of being in this mosque is having things explained to us. And as Rashad said in the khutbah today, it's a mercy from God that He sends a messenger from among us to explain to us. The knowledge is here in the Quran, and all of us have read the Quran. I read it once a month from front to back, and every time there's something new. And we get what we need at the time we need it. And we in this mosque are just developing so far, it's just amazing. Rashad and Lisa and Hassan went to Canada, and there where the people believe the way we do, they're still way behind us in the knowledge, because we're here every Friday night learning and studying. We have the input of all these believers here. And learning and studying, we have the input of all these believers here. And we have a messenger that is given the knowledge that is passed on to us. And we're responsible for the information in the Quran.
This was directed to the humans and the jinns. So there's two kinds of creatures. Creatures outside of the Satan completely, the jinns. And creatures that did not, were neutral, didn't make a stand with God, that's you and me. Given, God decided to give us the body of clay. originally, the same material as the earth. We are earthbound. But the jinns have a body of five differences. We are in a dimension and they are in a different dimension. Because the agreement called for Satan to remain invisible, just like God is invisible. Satan wanted to whisper to us while being invisible. Therefore, they had to be made of a different material in a different dimension. Also, the jinns being made from energy give them the abilities to travel a lot faster than the speed of light, millions of times the speed of light. They can go to the outer limit of our universe, 26 billion light years. So this gives them more to see, more evidence. God is giving them more evidence because they made a hard stand against God. So when they go to hell in the hereafter, it seems like this whole life is really to nullify the excuses of the humans and the jinn, the creatures who did not make a firm stand with God's absolute authority. In other words, had God listened to the angels initially and said, okay, all those who didn't make a stand with my absolute authority are banished, are out, go to hell. He would have said, oh, you didn't give us another chance. We didn't know how bad hell is. You didn't give us warnings. So this life is designed so that when the people insist, and the jinns insist to come to hell, they will not be able to say that. They will not be able to say, you didn't give us a chance, you didn't give us warnings, we didn't know what we were doing. If you told us how bad it is here in hell, we would have made a difference. God told us everything. The humans and the jinns, they told us how bad hell is, how to get out of it, how to redeem ourselves, how to make it back to God's kingdom. So the jinns, because they met this strong stand, they are given a chance to see more of the universe and to convince them to redeem themselves. We were wishy-washy, and this is the extent that we need to make that decision and to redeem ourselves. We have these different bodies.
Scripture too.
This is it.
They can read this thing.
Of course.
Oh.
So they have, did you see there was one show on the Today Show before the election, some presidential elections, not elections. And they had this magician or fellow who uses jinns, I'm sure. Before the elections, 2 weeks before the elections, on the show, they decided to put, he said, I'm going to put in this envelope who's going to win the elections and how many votes. And he sealed the envelope. That was 2 weeks before the elections. And he said, on the election day, the next day, they would open the envelope and they would see that he wrote down 2 weeks back, 2 weeks ago, who won the elections and how many votes. And how did they do that? Can you guess? What did they do?
They flew ahead in time and they got their information. But what did they do?
Okay, they don't know the future. The jinns don't know the future. They're just like us. But what they did, they waited until the newspaper came out and they said, Reagan won and here's the number of votes, and they go in the envelope and they write. That's right. This is how they will do it.
Well, what do you think about
Because
this?
this is the number of votes.
You know,
So what
the
I'm
other
saying
day-
is they can go into this book when it is closed.
But tell me this now.
You
The
have
other day
X-ray vision.
on the news, they showed pictures of Mars, and this is why they said the Russians did such a rush. That they found 2 faces on Mars, and they thought it was just shadows. So they did a close-up, and then they did a computer enhancement and saw teeth, the eyes and the teeth, they on these things.
No.
So I'm thinking
Somebody
about
made
this
that up.
thing. Now wait a minute. The first thing I thought about was Shazma. I bet Shazma said the jinns went there because they can
Yeah,
leave
they
Earth
can
and
laugh at
we
us.
can't. Right? And they can go up there and plant these things for us to see and make food out of people here.
Right.
And while we're busy
But they
worried
are
about this
strictly-
little thing on Mars, they sneak up. You know what I'm saying?
They're strictly
divert your
controlled now.
attention.
They cannot do anything without God's will. So if God wants us to be fooled in that way, He will allow them to do that. But But they cannot slap you in the face, for example. They're sitting with us right now. First of all, each one of us has one. Okay, those are not free yet. And then there are the ones that have been freed from dead people, our grandparents. They come in here regularly on this Quranic study, and it is recorded, it is documented. There's a person that said some Jains heard the Quran and went with their families and friends and told them, we heard the wonderful Quran, and they were guided, they became Muslims. So this is why we have this kind of body, and the Jews have that kind of body. And to this says, use me, O Lord, in thy work, and in parentheses, especially in an advisory capacity. Okay, anything else? There was something here about death. I wanted to think of death as getting rid of this lousy body and getting a new body that does not get sick or die. That's what death is, moving from stage to stage. And usually it happens when you're sick and tired of this body and you want a new one. The balance in number 7 can be understood by different generations, but now we understand the environmental balance, for example. Why do we have so many rabbits? Why do they reproduce so much in the wilderness? You see, the foxes need food. And there's an environmental balance. The foxes, the coyotes do not eat the rabbits to be invaded. There's hundreds of rabbits right here. But so I mean, this is a kind of balance. It's well known, all studied in school and seen it on TV, that there is some biological balance in the world. But this balance covers everything. And worrying has to do with cheating. It's a very important commandment. So Prophet Shu'aib was sent just for that particular commandment, not to cheat trading. When we break this commandment, it costs us a lot. If you cheat in paying your rent, collecting your rent, doing your work, or whatever, it costs you a lot, more than you cheat. So this is God's commandment. It's one of the very important commandments. A believer is an ideal person in honesty and truthfulness. Okay, if there are no questions, we'll go to 37.
What will that be?
The sky is blue now, right?
Right.
So in the hereafter it will be pink. It will be rose color. It will be almost like Sherry's blouse. A little lighter. With a beautiful sky in the sunset or the sunrise. So they studied, help me if it's not true. Psychologists, psychiatrists said that the most peaceful color is this color. In fact, they suggested that if you are tense to get a piece of this color, look at it for a couple of minutes. But the sky will be like that on the day of By the way, Laurie mentioned substitution of earth with the new earth, and the heavens with the new heaven, and we see this in the Old Testament and the New Testament as well. Most of the prophecies in the Old Testament are in the book of Isaiah. And if you want to put this in the Quran, you can put down Isaiah 65:22, for example. It talks about substitution of a new heaven, a new earth. 65:22 Isaiah. Also in 66:7. That's the very end of the book of Isaiah. And also in the New Testament you find it in the second book of Peter 3:13. The verse number is 1-3. Both of them talk about substitution of a new heaven, new earth. the Quran and the Old Testament. The Old Testament, the New Testament, and the Final Testament are identical in that respect. This is one fact that God wants you to know. When the day of judgment, the color of the sky is going to be rosy. There's something about Mars that is. I remember one of the cameras that went to Mars made that point. The sky there is reddish. Yeah, you know, the reason our sky is blue is the diffraction of the light. You know, the sunlight has 7 colors in it, the visible range anyway. And the blue happens to hit the atmosphere of the Earth at such an angle that it is deflected. So it stays out there at the Earth's atmosphere. So this is God's design. So it's blue. Now if the sunlight becomes a little, the change is just the angle hitting the atmosphere, some other color will be reflected. It's a very simple matter.
The reason they say the sunset is pinkish red is because of the sun, the dust in the atmosphere, the reflection of the sun hitting the dust, the particle of the dust. This is the same, color of the surface, the circle. The same color.
Also, the reflection is different at sunrise and sunset. I'm glad you brought this up. At sunrise and sunset, there is a deflection and refraction. You know, when you go fishing and you put a stick in the water, you see the stick go like this. Red stick, but you can see it's called. I forget now the reflection and refraction, all those physics terms. But the sunlight hits the Earth's atmosphere, and this happens to it. It depends on which angle, which light of the spectrum is hitting at what angle. This one changes the colors. So anyway, one of the things that God wants us to know is that the sky is rosy. Very pleasant. Only to the believers. Pleasant to the believers.
In verse 39, we're told that on the day of resurrection, that neither jinn nor humans will be asked about their sins because they won't be necessary. We know from other verses in the Quran that everything that we've done in our lifetime has been recorded by reporters that are honest and never miss anything at all, and it's recorded. And we know now with the the development of the videotape that that's what it's going to be like. We can see everything exactly as it was, as it took place. Everything we said, all the thoughts that we had, everything we did will be recorded. And for those of us who are fortunate enough to have developed our souls to the extent that we're worthy of having our sins remitted, we'll have the power to edit our tapes. Which will be so nice. And everybody else won't. And we've been told in many verses in the Quran that we don't have to even, we won't even be asked about our sins because everything will testify to them. Our skin, everything has been recording everything that we've done all this time.
And here, something that we should all know. I know nobody knows that. It's just the definition of yes. It has to do with the looks. So verse 40 says, I went to you, Lord, 39. Will not be asked. Oh, 39, yeah. The humans and the jinns will not be asked about their sins. Nobody will need to ask anybody about anything because the believers develop their souls and the disbelievers fail to develop their souls. And in Surah 17 we're told that the differences in the hereafter, in this room, the difference in our sizes are within a few inches. But in the hereafter, the difference would be like the difference between a mouse and the city of New York, the city of Tucson. So when you see somebody the size of the city of Tucson, he or she has developed the soul sufficiently. That's why they will be able to come closer to God. When you see somebody the size of a mouse, you don't need to ask, what did you do wrong? So this is why nobody will need to ask anybody about this sin. It is so obvious. There will be no question. Also in Surah 17 we're told that everybody will be the judge for him or herself. Because in that dimension we will see what we really look like, how much we really developed, or how much we lack development. So 41, the guilty will be recognized by the looks. They'll be undeveloped, they'll be shrunken. It's like being born without arms and legs. Deformed. They will be born into the hereafter, deformed, undeveloped, aborted. But they'll be alive, very well, very, very alive, not well. Also, God lets us understand, as Lord explained about 44, how they will try to sneak into heaven and they'll find it worse than hell. They will sneak into the lower heaven and they will find it worse than hell because they cannot stand to come any closer to God. See, God left it completely up to us, completely. That's why God does not inflict an atom's weight of injustice. It's absolutely up to you. You can be as close to God as you want in the high heaven, or you can be as far from God as you want. It's completely up to us. So the conclusion is that God does not put a single person in heaven. It is the people who insist or choose and insist on going to heaven. The whole thing will be automatic in the hereafter. That's why it is important to do, for example, the 5 prayers a day. If you don't do the 5 prayers every day, you're in trouble. That's the minimum that you can do. Because those are the means for the real person. So imagine if you don't feel it, your body does not die and you don't feel the body for 2 months. What will your body look like? There's no death in the hereafter. Just imagine not eating for 2 months. And the people out there in the street, they don't feed their soul for years and years and years. Can you imagine what they look like? Can you imagine what they look like? Just bring it to our dimension here and think of bodies that didn't eat for a year. You see those skeletal pictures in the starving people in Central Africa, Ethiopia, Sudan, what they look like? You can see the ribs. Shrunk, skin and bones. And this happens to the soul. If the soul is not fed, the 5 meals every day. The guilty will be recognized by their looks. You can tell who is starving in Africa and who is not by looking at them. And then hereafter you'll be able to know who is starving and who is not, except it will be by choice. So now we'll go back to Lori and number 46, the higher heaven.
Yes. For those who reverence the glory of their Lord, there will be 2 paradises. Which of you Lord's marvels can you 2 deny? With abundant vegetation, which of you Lord's marvels can you 2 deny? 2 springs run freely therein. Which of you Lord's marvels can you 2 deny? They will have 2 kinds of every fruit. Which of you Lord's marvels can you 2 deny? They will relax on furnishings lined with silk, while the fruits of the 2 gardens are brought near. Which of your Lord's marvels can you 2 deny? They will have magnificent fountains therein, never before touched by any human or jinn. Which of your Lord's marvels can you 2 deny? They will look like gems and coral. Which of your Lord's marvels can you 2 deny? Is the reward of righteousness anything but the best blessings? Which of your Lord's marvels can you 2 deny?
Verse 15, I have some very good news for you. Not flattering you, you're very, very special people. You've got to go to the highest heaven. I'm going to explain to you why. When Abraham started the religion of Islam, according to God's instructions, he and the people around him were worshipping God alone. And as time went by, Satan sneakily and gradually added idol worship until the time of Muhammad came, some centuries later. By the time Muhammad came, they were worshipping lots of idols. Lat, Manat, the Uzza, and all that. They were in the Kaaba that Abraham built. And we've read how many verses in the Quran that say Abraham was never an idol worshipper. Yet there is the Kaaba that he built that was full of idols. And then God renewed the message, sent the Quran to Muhammad, and sent Muhammad to tell the people the idols are bad, worship God alone, worship God alone. So what happened? And Muhammad and his company were persecuted severely. They threw on them all kinds of dirt and thorns. Then they banished them when they grew. There were about 10 or 15 people for about 3 years. Then they grew to about maybe 25 or 30 people. Then they thought they were getting too strong, so they banished them out of Mecca, boycotted them. And those people were abused. So those have to have a special place in heaven. They went against the current. They were worshipping God alone in an ocean of idolatry. You can easily see that they are very special people. They will be in the highest place in the high heaven, because even within the high heaven and the low heaven there will be ranks. Okay, now 20 years ago, you see how it says here to you from the later generations. Now these are later generations after Muhammad. 1400 years after Muhammad, there is not a single mosque in the Muslim world that was worshipping God alone, that is upholding the commandment, the mosque belongs to God, we shall worship, we shall not mention other names with God. And then God renewed the message right now. And the message went loud and clear, ringing throughout the whole world: worship God alone, say La ilaha illallah, not La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. And devote yourself to God alone, uphold the commandments of the Quran, purify your worship, your prayer is wrong, your fasting is wrong, your zakat is wrong. These are all blessings from God that He sent to our generation. And again, we are subject to the same persecution, the same ridicule. Lucky us. Yours truly cannot go into any country in the Middle East. I'll be shot within 24 hours. Just symbolizes. And if you go to the Middle East, you better disown me. I'm asking you to do that. I mean, God says even disown God if you are under those circumstances, as long as your heart is filled with faith. If you don't want to get in trouble, you better tell them, I don't know Rashad Khalif. But this is, you are very, very special people. You've gone through the mill, ridicule, and mocking. Today, Tasneem calls me from New York, and she was talking to some relatives of her in Chicago, who are very active in the so-called Islamic Center. And she told them, I'm devoting myself to God alone. I only say La ilaha illallah. And guess what they said? They said Tasneem went to the dogs. She's worshipping God alone. And this is ridicule, right? You ridiculed her. You know, you're saying La ilaha illallah, you're saying worship God alone. You mean God alone? That's all you have, God? I mean, do you see the logic? They're ridiculing her. Mahmoud was working the other night, and some so-called Muslims walked in the store, and they saw the label that says Muhammad or Mahmoud on the label. He said, are you a Muslim? He said, yes. They said, how come we don't see you at the mosque? He said, how come I don't see you at the mosque? So they said, oh, you mean you go to that mosque? The mosque that worships God alone, right? Now Noah, if you remember in the Quran, Noah said, because Noah was building the ark with the flat float, whatever you call it, water raft, and they were laughing at him, and he told them, he said, you're laughing at me, but I'm really laughing at you. And that's what Mahmoud actually was doing in the store, because they said, oh, we never believe in mathematics. Now this is the now on that day they probably had an exam in calculus, right? At the university. And they had to follow the formulas and the equations, and otherwise they would flunk. So they believe in mathematics, but if it comes to God and the Quran and worshiping God alone, they don't believe in mathematics. So they were looking at Mahmoud, ridiculing him, and of course in his heart he knows 4 souls. Just like Noah, he was ridiculing them. Just like he was laughing at them, just like they were laughing at him. But this makes Mahmoud a very special person. This is what it means, multitudes from the early generation. We are the first generation of renewing the message. And we see it very clearly. Every one of us is in the light, and we can see it. Just go in any mosque in the world and say La ilaha illallah, and they will beat you up. You are saying worship God alone. So you can see what happens after centuries from the first generation. Abraham was the first generation. And those people, they threw Abraham in the fire, right? In those days there was no America for Abraham to run to. They threw him in the fire, so what did God do? He turned the fire into a cool and safe place. Because God said, do not think that I will abandon my messengers. God creates exits for them. So the exit for Abraham was a cool and safe fire. And the people who were with him, they were persecuted. And they had to be special people, because the easiest thing is to go along with the masses, with the crowd. You think this shook Mahmoud? Not one hair. And that's why it's very special. I'm just using Mahmoud as an example. Muhtasham went to a grocery store to buy some Middle Eastern stuff. And he met some Arabs there. They're just totally ignorant. They know nothing. But he says, yes, we'll go to Masjid Dusan, we worship God alone. And they almost beat him up. If he wasn't big enough and strong enough, and a Turk, he would have beaten him up. So why do you have to take all this abuse and all this ridicule? Do you think it took him up? Did it affect his faith? If anything, it strengthened his faith. Well, he knows that those people are off. He knows they're ignorant. He knows they're not worshiping God alone. He knows they lost the prayer, but they never pray. Those people that do. Do you think they pray?
I asked how many students in the Quran you get?
Right? You don't know? You don't know?
How can you say, man, they were were saying, you go to hell with the Shaparita, because they were pointing, one of them was looking at it was Palestinian.
Right.
You go to hell with.
And he doesn't know how many stories in the Quran.
Wait on to the day of judgment.
All of you.
There's
Every
no
single
base
one.
for their argument.
The Bashar couple, the Bashars, they ridiculed him so many times. You mean you go to that mosque? And the answer is, show me a place where they worship God alone, and they go. We'll go to that place. I will go to that place. Any place where they worship God alone, we'll go. God is the one, the Rasul says, God is the one who created you. God is the one who provides for you. God is the one who controls your health, your welfare. God is the one who controls your happiness. God is the only one who controls your success. Muhammad is dead. The saints are dead. Jesus is dead. Powerless. Even when they were alive, they had absolutely no power. So, maybe it's just because you're going through. This is the first generation. We are so lucky. We are a first generation, just like Abraham's generation, Muhammad's generation. Muhammad's generation, they went through the ridicule, the abuse, and they had to leave their city, Mecca, and go to Medina. The persecution they went through, because of this, God reserves a special place for them. God is reserving a special place for us. I'm saying it by God's grace. So I have this very good news for you. But you fit here in verse 15, multitude from the early generations. In 50 years, I assure you, in 50 years, there will be millions of people worshiping God alone and upholding the Quran alone and praying the correct way. Millions. In just 50 years. But they will be following the crowd. They cannot be like you. They will be protected by their numbers. Right in this location, right here, there will be thousands on this block, in this mosque. And they'll be powerful, the people jumping on the wagon. But they don't deserve the same position or the same credit as you. So this is what it means. Multitude from the early generations, but only a few from the last generations. Because these are the far ahead in Arabic, Sabakun is Sabakun. These will be the closest to God. They're very special. And that's you. And you start collecting benefits now. And we've seen it. We have a history already. We have a track record in this month, 10 years of a track record, a perfect track record in this life. It's guaranteed by God. You may have a pinch here and there because we make mistakes. The tests are brief for you, but if you stray off the path, you know you're going to get a pinch. And you get the pinch and say, thank you God, and come back to the path. You are very special people. You deserve a lot of congratulations. God says in Surah 35 that the angels have wings 2, 3, and 4. 2, 3, and 4 because the angels closest to God will be the most powerful, the highest in rank. You'll have more wings. This is figuratively speaking. And these are Sabakun, these far ahead people like yourselves will be there. I mean, all those are angels, but still they have ranks. And 50 years from now, the thousands of people who will be in this location, inshallah, they will go to the high heaven because they worship God alone, and they will pray the correct way, and they'll go to the high heaven, but they cannot attain your rank because you're the ones who are taking the abuse. The people who take the abuse and the ridicule have a very special position in the Bible and in the Quran. I had a little thing hanging there for a while that says congratulations to those who are persecuted. Well, the prophets also have been persecuted. Remember that verse? I had it hanging there. And this is God telling you congratulations. The Bible. So we are very, very lucky, and I'm stressing. I keep stressing this because I cannot stress it enough. Just so we can thank God, so we can be appreciative, so you know who you are. Satan will always put doubts in your mind. Always will tell you you're nobody. He hates your guts, okay? Because he's going to be deep, deep in hell. You hear that, man? You're asking about Satan and the hereafter? He will not be in heaven, no. He will not even come close. He and his troops will be way deep down in the lowest pit of hell. And he'll be beating them and they'll be beating him. You're going to spend eternity doing that. So he will try to tell you you're a nobody, but you speak back to him. You tell him, I believe God, and I believe that I am in this group, multitude from the early generations, because this is a first generation. I mean, I couldn't believe it myself. For a long time I said, couldn't it be just us here worshiping God alone? There must be millions in the world. I discovered that I'm naive, that the human being is really bad. I was talking to my nephew, Sharif, in Egypt, and he says, I'm the only one in Egypt. He really is a believer. You can tell the people who believe, because they are in the light, they understand. And he's the only one that I know in Egypt that is really a believer. Inshallah, he will come for the conference. He's only 20. He was born 2 weeks before Beth. And he's the only believer in all of Egypt. I mean, I was really naive. I mean, I said there must be millions in Egypt to worship God alone. Nope. Wrong. So that's why I'm speaking so strongly. And I'm telling you, you're very special. And when Satan tells you you're not, you tell him to shut up. You're very special. This is the verse that talks about you. Congratulations. Yes. And this time, right now. Because Muhammad's time, Ibrahim's time, and this time, our time. We are a first generation. Right now. Because we are the fortunate generation that is renewing God's message, restoring it, cleaning out all the junk and innovations. When you go back to Iran for a visit, you'll be, which town will you be in? Tehran? I think you'll be the only one in Tehran who's been praying the correct way, and you and Nadir, the kid. You'll be the one, and they laugh at you. When you tell them in the tashahhud, I just say the name of God alone, so you mean you don't mention Muhammad or Ahl al-Bayt or Ali? No? See, this is what we cleaned out. Cleaned out all the creatures. We just mentioned the Creator. And this is restoring the religion. So you are a first generation. So this makes you special or not? When you're the only one in Tehran who's praying the correct way.
How beautiful the highest heaven is. We know, of course, that these are all allegorical descriptions, that God uses allegory because there's no way that we in our present states can even begin to understand really what is in store for us. But we know from the allegory of the highest heaven that it is truly bliss, and that it is wonderful beyond our dreams. God says that anything we wish for, those who are in the highest heaven, inshallah, will be there. Anything they wish for and even more. So God's grace is even greater than anything we can comprehend or desire, wish for. And then those on the right, those in the lower heaven, for them also, it's incredibly beautiful. And it's peace. Peace to you from those on the right. An incredible triumph to be among those on the right. But if he is one of the rejectors, the strayers, then the retribution and burning hell. We know, again, that we can't comprehend really the awfulness of hell. We have a slight idea because we are as far from God as anything in the universe at this point. And we know how hellish this world is and how awful it is, particularly when you step out of God's kingdom. We're incredibly blessed to be in God's kingdom, inshallah. But as soon as you step out, you know what an incredible hell that is. And that is nothing compared to the ultimate hell. This is the inevitable truth. You shall glorify the name of your Lord, the Great. MashaAllah. Are there any comments or questions on these last verses?
88 and 89 refers to you, to special people. And I say this with thanking God, and God says, speak up of God's blessings on you. We're very, very rare, fortunate and blessed group of people. And 90 refers to all the people who died before the age of 40. It says, and if he belongs with those on the right, those people will be very happy, because they will go to the lower heaven. God knew that they do not deserve to go to hell, they deserve to go to the lower heaven because of circumstances that only he knows. That's why he took them at that. They're the children that came here to perform a function. And they were assigned souls that God knows deserve to go to the lower heaven. Well, they lived until the age of 39 or just before 40. And when God takes them at that time, because had they lived, they would have been swept by circumstances. Which brings me to a point that I will be talking about, inshallah, on the khutbah 2 weeks from today, inshallah. Where very quickly God says, we granted Abraham his understanding, for we were fully aware of him. Okay, this verse tells you it was not Abraham's intelligence that led him to discover God. God granted him the understanding because God knew that Abraham deserved to go to the high heaven. And the other verse that I wish to share with you is Joseph, when Joseph almost fell for the governor's wife. And then God said, if it were not that he saw a sign from his Lord, then God says, we thus divert sin from him. So was it Joseph who was so great that he didn't fall in sin, or was it God that protected him from sin? It was God that protected him from sin. By the way, the verse goes on and says, إِنَّهُ مِنْ عِبَادِنَا الْمُخْلَصِينَ, that he was one of our devoted servants. Because he was one of God's devoted servants, God diverted him from, protected him from sin. So what I'm saying is that when we agreed with Satan billions of years ago, some of us were swept in the crowd, and God knew that. This is what God meant when he said to the angels said, put them all in hell. And God said, I know what you do not know. So God knows that we were swept in the crowd. Some of us were swept in the crowd and do not deserve to go to hell. And this is why God granted Abraham his understanding. God granted you the portion to come across the true message, worshiping him alone and upholding his word alone. It's not because you're clever or because I'm smart. Because apparently God, not apparently, obviously God knew that some of us were swept in the crowd somehow, and we agreed with Satan. And we deserved the chance to come here to be redeemed. So the people who are taken, like Martin Luther King, taken only a few months before his birthday, Malcolm X being taken 2 months before his birthday, his 40th birthday, and all the other signs that we have seen. In fact, if you look at verse 41, where you're holding the book now, you see 41 is the beginning of hell. So those who didn't make the decision, if you look at the previous surah, verse 41, now we know from this circle here that these numbers of verses are divinely designed for a reason, and we have all these mathematical proofs. Once you get into the age of 41, you better be worshiping God alone. Yeah, just a second. I don't want to forget what I'm saying. So, had God left Martin Luther King to live beyond the age of 40, he would have been swept. That's the word that brought me to the khutbah 2 weeks from now. He would have been swept by his environment and his circumstances into maybe mentioning Jesus and things like that and go along. He was a pastor in a church, I think. But in his heart, and even vocally, he never said anything about Jesus. Not that I heard of. In his vast amount of recordings, he always talked about God. So that's why God chose to take him at that time, to protect him from going beyond to this number 41 and be swept by his environment and his circumstances into Christianity. So he will be like we see here on verse 90. If he belongs with those on the right, then peace to you from those on the right. And you can be sure that God's justice put these people exactly in the right place. He deserves to be in the lower heaven. When Satan made that blasphemy billions of years ago, there were degrees of convictions among us that go from the jinns who completely agreed with Satan to the majority of humans who were wishy-washy. They didn't. To some who were swept in the crowd, and hopefully that's us. So now Kathy has a question. You're talking about a very special group of people who will be the closest to God on the day of judgment. They're very special people, and this will be like when the Prophet Muhammad started to preach. Well, let's go to Abraham. Abraham started Islam, and then there were people who were with him when the others were throwing him in the fire. And then by the time the Prophet Muhammad came, they became idol worshippers. Then the message was renewed by revealing the Quran through the Prophet Muhammad, and he was secretly preaching, and there were people with him. Those are very special people. This is the first generation.
And then Muhammad became victorious and he opened Mecca, and all the people in Mecca became believers. They jumped in the wagon. But they do not deserve the same credit as the people who were with him when he was being persecuted and having stones thrown at him, and he was cussed and called names and persecuted. Does this make sense? So that was a first generation at the time of Ibrahim, at the time of Muhammad. And then 10 years ago, Islam was totally corrupted. There is not a single mosque in the world that upholds the commandment to mention only the name of God in the mosque, in the worship practices and so on. And then God renewed the message with this miracle. So now we are a first generation. And the people who are in this movement, while it is being persecuted, and the names and the insults and so on, are very special people. Now, 10 years from now, we probably have millions, maybe 20 years, 50 years from now, and everybody will jump on the wagon, but they do not deserve the same credit as you do. So, these very special people will be multitudes from this generation. And after that, when it is famous and successful and it is the thing to do, they don't deserve the same credit. They will not be in the same rank. This is what we did last week when we were absent. We didn't even know if he was really 40 or not. They didn't have birth certificates then. They were just guessing that the Prophet was 40 when he was reckoned and given the Quran. But it has nothing to do with that. It is in the Quran, in Surah 46, verse 15. It says, that's what it says there. It's based on that. Any other questions?
He is with you wherever you may be. God is seer of everything you do. He truly is in absolute control of the universe. This verse to me expresses it very, very clearly and very, very beautifully. Verse 5, to him belongs the dominion of the heavens and the earth. God is in full control of all things. These verses again and again are saying absolutely what we've been saying, that God does everything. And yet it is so hard for us to accept that. I mean, you can hear it and you can say yes, but then, you know, you get sidetracked. Oh, if I don't take my vitamins, I'm going to get sick. You aren't going to get sick unless you deserve to get sick. That doesn't mean you shouldn't take your vitamins, because God has given us the vitamins. He's given us the medicines. But we have to remember that God is the one who is controlling everything, who is doing everything. God controls our bosses. God controls our neighbors. God controls our spouses. He controls not only the physical things, He controls the emotions, the hearts and the minds of those around us and of us. As Rashad pointed out so beautifully, God bestowed on Abraham his righteousness, his understanding. Well, God says very clearly that He bestows on all of us our righteousness. It's not us. It's not ours. God gives it to us. He controls our hearts and our minds. If we make that one choice, the only thing we really control is that one choice of whether we worship God alone or not. And once we've made that decision, He goes from there. He takes it from there. And there are a lot of verses that talk about God misguiding those who disbelieve. Well, they made...
Yeah. Any questions about the lower heavens? Hell. 41. Hell goes right after 41. Wait, what? It's 41. My God.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
This has a meaning. Yep. 41 means hell. If you don't make that, if you don't make that decision by that.
Okay.
That's here everywhere. No.
41 and higher. We didn't make it. Remember the circle? This circle here means every verse in the Quran is numbered according to a system. God said. Billahi min ash-shaytan ar-rajim. We take refuge in God from Satan. who was the basic cause for us being here in this world. And may God make it backfire on it and give us happiness in this world and forever through believing in God alone. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. We are going to start with Surah 51, grade 366. And our teacher tonight, I forgot his name. I don't know. Do you remember what's your name, sir?
Rashid.
What's your name?
Rashid.
I'm serious. He actually forgot. Rashid.
Douglas Brown.
Oh, Douglas Brown.
Yes.
You're sure?
I'm sure of that.
Okay.
You'll find out later when I tell out.
The very nervous teacher today. And you can the surah. You know, a believer appreciates God differently from people who are unaware or who are not strong believers. You can see here that the title of the surah is the winds, and we learn from the first few verses that the winds, their main job is to carry clouds that bring bounties. We need that water. So in order to appreciate God and these simple words, just imagine yourself sending 10 astronauts to space. You sending 10 astronauts to space, and you tell them, okay, you're going to be out there for 3 years, and when you need water, I made an invention in the spaceship, so there'll be these clouds on top of you and they will give you water. You're sending them into space. And you devise that system that will give them water, clean water. When they pollute the water they have on the spaceship, it's going to, one of the number one purification processes is distillation. So when they pollute their own water, it's going to evaporate, it's going to be pure water and come down again. So you tell them that, so to assure them that they will have enough water supply for 3 years, or 5 years, 10 years, whatever you're sending them. Just imagine that. See, God sent this spaceship with 5 billion astronauts. You and me, we are astronauts. That's right. When God gave us this system, God devised this system where the water evaporates and then comes down by the wind, drive the clouds here. How far are we from the ocean? We're far from the ocean. But these clouds came to us from the ocean by the wind. It's a traveling system. And then it sends down pure water. You appreciate God if you think, if you imagine sending 10 astronauts in space and you tell them, I'm going to give you the exact percentage of oxygen for you to breathe. Now in 1967 we were technologically advanced people. In 1967. But we put 3 astronauts in a capsule in an atmosphere of 100% oxygen. Pure oxygen, right? To breathe. And all it took was a spark, and the 3 astronauts were combusted. Ed White, Gus Grissom, and Roger Chaffee. They are not with us today because of that. We were really advanced in science. But when you put anything in pure oxygen and light a match, everything will be combusted. Everything organic, that is. In fact, this is for chemists. If any chemist is here, this is the last thing you do to find out if there is, for example, radioactivity in the ashes of anything. You put it in a closed thing there, you fill it with 100% oxygen, and you create a spark. And everything will be combusted into ashes. This is what happened with the 3 astronauts. And that's why God didn't give us 100% oxygen. We have 20% oxygen. The rest is nitrogen. And this is what they do now when they send astronauts into space. But we learned the hard way. So, despite we were sending people to the moon, and we couldn't give them the correct atmosphere. So these few verses here will make us appreciate God if we think of sending our own astronauts into space.
course, you know how the oxygen is generated for us. We breathe it and we get out carbon dioxide, which is not good for breathing. So God designed the trees so they will take carbon dioxide and turn it into apples and give us the oxygen. They take the carbon and give us back the oxygen. How do you like that for a system? Can you do that for your astronauts? You tell your 10 astronauts you're going to be out there for 10 years and you're going to breathe out carbon dioxide, so I'm going to give you a couple of, I invented these plants or something that will take your carbon dioxide, turn it into food for you, and you'll get the oxygen back. Such is God's creation. And you think it's all evolution, right? Are there any questions on these, the winds and the rains, boundaries? We're talking only about the 5 billion human beings. You forget the 10 decillion ants and the about 200 billion mice. أحسن. There may be a few of them in this mosque running around. The name scares her, this way. Okay, back to Douglas. Yes, yes.
I mean, language is just amazing.
This is mentioned specifically as a great miracle in the Quran, you know, the languages. Just go to Europe and
we don't doubt
where
we don't doubt the fact
within a radius of 50 miles, not 50, 20 miles in Europe, you can come across 15 languages. Around Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Austria. Within Czechoslovakia there are several languages. And it's just amazing how these people understand each other, but these people don't understand them, they understand each other. And it's a miracle. Still amazing.
an incredible miracle and a mystery to us at this point in our understanding.
Any questions or comments?
There you said it, his only son. Isaac was never the only son. You said the truth right now.
Isn't that the reason they say it? Is because Isaac was his only legitimate son by his own life.
This is how they justify it. It didn't say take your only legitimate son. It said take your only son. Even if he's illegitimate. But he was not illegitimate. Did you try you take your only son or your only illegitimate son? No. Somebody, of course, the Jews and the Christians believe it was Isaac. But that's a racial distortion. They said take your only son, comma, Isaac, comma. So they made a boo-boo there, because Isaac was never the only son. So when you tell them, when you confront them with that only son business, because Ishmael was 14 years older than Isaac, they tell you, oh, it's because Isaac was the only legitimate son. They said, okay, let's look at the Bible. And the Bible consistently calls Ishmael Abraham's son until Abraham dies, and then they say, when Abraham died, his two sons, Ishmael and Isaac, buried him. So there's no way out. No, he didn't. No, you read it in some novel. From who? No, it's not in Genesis, no. Okay, Abraham had, Sarah was sterile, she didn't have anything but Isaac. Yeah, there are lots of novels that he said he married this and that. Any other children, they are irrelevant because the Quran and the Bible mention only Ishmael and Isaac. Nobody else. In Genesis 22,
In Genesis 22, around 25, it says, when Abraham died, his two sons, Ishmael and Isaac, buried him. So Ishmael was Abraham's son. He was the only son of Abraham for 14 years. Isaac was never the only son.
What would be, I mean, what would be maybe
Isaac
Isaac?
is the father of the Jews. Ishmael is the father of the Arabs. The Jews wrote played around with the Genesis, the Torah.
So the idea is that they just wanted the miracle to be a miracle of Isaac.
Right. They don't have anything to Ishmael to have anything to do with anything. So they made a big mistake. It's God just. So they made a big mistake. It's God just like the two verses in the Quran. Exactly. They made a glaring error. And they try to correct it in the newer editions of the Bible. They say, take your only one. You know, trying very hard, but they make it worse. The only one what? Donkey or? I mean,
They're talking about, you know, Jesus and all this.
don't learn, do they? They learn nothing. People bring the destruction on themselves. We know that with Sodom and Gomorrah, they were all corrupted beyond reform. And this is the one thing that they brought it on themselves. So it is God's law that when they do this, they are destroyed. Nowadays, where homosexuals are spread in the society, you cannot just destroy the city of Tucson because there are 1,000 homosexuals in it. But you can send a virus to pick them out. And this is what's happening now. Their parents brought it on them. Right, they brought it on themselves. Their family take the children out of God's protection. So this is what happens.